Welcome to Hellon's second Dare to Share event. My name is Zeynep Falay von Flittner, and I will be your host today. With Dare to Share events, we like to talk about the exciting projects we have at Hellon and share our thinking with a wider audience in order to push the boundaries of design and increase our positive impact. A few housekeeping notes first. Your mics are muted and at the moment, and we will start with the presentation first. And then in the last 20 minutes, we will have a Q&A session. Please use the chat function in the webinar to ask questions and present comments during the event. I will try to answer some of them directly, and some of the questions we will ask to our speakers. We will also have a couple of polls coming up during the event, so please be active and we will share the results to make this more interactive for you as well. So for those of you who are not familiar with Hellon, we are a boutique service design and customer experience agency. We have employees located in Helsinki and London, and we combine our human-centric design with business design and machine learning to help our clients to create customer value. And you are watching this feed right now from our office in Helsinki. And we were very happy to keep the doors open with limited capacity, of course, during the pandemic times. And a majority of our employees have been working virtually over 1 year, and which actually made it possible for us to collaborate with clients all around the world. So there has been also some benefits for that. The wall you see behind me is presents Hellon's values. We have co-created these with all the employees together. And I would like to present you 2 of them right now. On the right side, you see change hearts and numbers. And this value basically emphasizes our roots in human-centric design and in the emotional impact and connection with the customers. But we are combining that with the safety of numbers that comes from machine learning and business design projects. In our first Dare to Share session, actually, we presented our approach, how we combine service design and machine learning. If you're interested and haven't seen that, please go and check the video of the recorded. On the other side, we have Dare to Care, which also inspired the name of this event. And we are encouraging our clients to care about their customers, employees, as well as, of course, the whole environment and planet as a whole, and understand this larger impact they create. So let's have our first interaction now. We are interested to know who is in the audience. I can see already there's 114 attendees, and it's increasing. So I'm going to share the first poll. You should see on your screens. So where do you work? Pick the closest option to you. Are you coming from a research institution, consultancy, private company, public sector organization, or non-governmental organization, or anything else? Let's wait for everybody to vote, and then I will share the results. Now, 76%. Okay, I give a couple of more seconds. All right, maybe 85%. I'm gonna close the poll right now and share the results. So we have almost half of the audience from a consultancy, and then we have 20% from research institutions and private companies, and now we have some representative from public sector and non-government as well. Excellent. I will close this now and continue to introduce our speakers today. So we have a very exciting topic today about imagining sustainable futures, which is also very close to my heart. But today I have two colleagues talking about this topic. The first one is Sonja Nielsen. She's a sustainability strategist and a service designer who has been working in different strategic consulting companies. She's been doing sustainability research, and last 1 year she's been with us at Hellon. And she will a little bit set the scene about what's happening today in the world and what needs to happen for the future. Then Kirsikka Vaajakallio will be our second speaker, who is a principal designer at Hellon, and she has almost 20 years of experience in service design. Kirsikka finished her PhD on design games as a tool and a mindset and a structure. So she's really expert on how to apply design games in different service design projects. And she's been with Hellon already 9 years. She's been helping many public and private companies to transform towards more customer-centric direction. And with these ending, without further ado, I give the word to Sonja to start her presentation. Okay, we can see now full screen. Sonja, but you are mute.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zeynep, for the kind introduction. So hello, my name is Sonja Nielsen, as Zeynep introduced before. And in this webinar, I'll discuss futures-oriented thinking as a means to address the much needed transitions towards more sustainable futures. So in this presentation, I'll first give a status update of the current, then we move our attention towards the future, and lastly, we discuss how to imagine potential pathways from the current towards alternative futures. So let's start from the current now. So how is it going? To put things bluntly, things are not going too well. And we need to admit that we exist already in the middle of multiple sustainability crises. The concept of planetary boundaries describes the status quo quite well in terms of ecological and environmental sustainability. This concept describes the critical boundaries of 9 planetary processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth system. And what is striking is that already at least 4 of these have been exceeded, namely climate change, loss of biodiversity, land system change, and biochemical flows. And all these kind of exceeding these different boundaries increase the risk of the stability in the Earth systems, and through that also fundamentally affect the living conditions for human communities and the surrounding ecosystems. And furthermore, these also represent only the natural crises that we surround ourselves in, as environmental changes are, of course, connected to other sustainability challenges, such as large-scale climate migration and also increasing political instabilities. So importantly, these crises are happening now. They are not waiting for us in the future. And furthermore, these challenges are highly complex and interconnected. And because of that, so difficult and abstract for us to comprehend and understand. However, these are actually already quite visible and tangible in the society at the moment. Firstly, after decades of unclarity, and now both international, national, and also local political organizations have started initiating actions to address these crises through, for instance, political treaties, target setting, and legislative changes. Some important examples of these include, for instance, the Paris Agreement 2015, then also the recent European Green Deal, and also national and the local target setting, for instance, Finland's carbon neutrality plan for 2035. Secondly, these crises have already cross-cutting effects on the business environment through, for instance, changing purchasing behavior and incentives, and also resource scarcity and increasing risks in the value chain, changing legislation and social norms, and then finally changing financial market and KPIs, which of course affect how businesses are being measured at the moment. So considering the seriousness of the situation, it is quite obvious that we need radical actions that go beyond the status quo in all sectors of society, from global to local and from private to public. But in order to set and implement the very much needed sustainability goals in the now, we need to also get better in understanding the future consequences of our actions. And also, in order to get motivated to act, we need to get better at imagining what could be. But how can we steer our actions towards a future that we cannot imagine? So that's why we need to move our attention now towards the future. So try for a moment to imagine how the future could be like in 20 years' time, for instance, in your hometown or in the society at large. What kind of pictures come to your mind, or are they actually any pictures? I've noticed that especially in the context of environmental crisis, it seems like when we try to think about the future, we approach it either through dystopian narratives or through utopian dream worlds, which both kind of represent rather abstract views on the future. So let's take now for dystopias under consideration first. So dystopias represent the undesirable, horrific visions of the future. For instance, the polar bears on the last ice floe, or the uninhabitable deserts, which we all know from the news. And these often describe how the future will be like if we don't do anything in the now. And at the moment, it seems like these dystopian stories represent the most common way to describe the future, both in public discussion as well as also in fine arts and popular culture, for instance, in sci-fi movies, as in this picture. This is quite understandable, as both scientists and journalists, of course, aim to describe honestly and factually how and where the world is going. And in addition, you can, of course, also create quite nice and catchy storylines through dystopian narratives. And the good side of dystopias is that sometimes an appropriate amount of anxiety and despair turns into action. So they kind of tell us about the urgency of action, which is of course needed in the now. However, dystopias also evoke feelings of horror and despair, or trigger defensive reactions or escapism, which are maybe not the most effective feelings to trigger action towards a better future. Utopias, on the other hand, represent the dream worlds or the unreachable paradises, or the ideal but impossible and unattainable future societies. Utopias are nowadays underrepresented both in the public discussion as well as in fine arts and popular culture, which is kind of surprising, as many hardly consider the current world to be the best possible version of what it could be. One reason for that might be that utopias easily feel too speculative or too abstract or even too soft. Like if we just look at this picture, we can kind of imagine that. But perhaps the biggest challenge with utopian narratives is that creating them always requires a value debate of what kind of a future we want to be building. We need to take a political and philosophical stance of what kind of a future we want to build. And maybe even artists can be cautious to take that stance. However, at best, utopian stories can give direction to take bold steps towards a brighter future. So they are inherently narratives of hope. However, the downside of them is that they might seem too unattainable, too far-reaching, and even too good to be true for triggering any notable action in the now. So considering that at the moment, the future is represented either through dystopian futures or through these far-reaching utopian futures that we might not be able to reach, maybe the probable and desirable futures lie somewhere in between the utopian and dystopian worlds. So these futures are the possible ones to reach, but still radically different than the status quo, which has turned out to be quite a disruptive one, as I presented in the beginning. So now we are approaching the future, or like the ways in between the future and the current. And now we are trying to think, how to approach those alternative desirable futures and how might we practice our collective imagination to make them the main narrative of our time. Sometimes when we're talking about these pathways, we talk about transitions, for instance. And transitions are, of course, these long-term pathways that shape the society at large. And of course, we cannot change the future. We cannot affect the future totally, but we can aim to influence the direction of these transitions. As many of you know, futures thinking and methods such as forecasting provide quite valuable tools to think about and imagine possible futures and thus give us direction to move our actions. And some of these methods are more quantitative ones, some of these are more qualitative ones. But in the following, we'll take futures-oriented thinking as a starting point and go through certain aspects that might be helpful to consider when aiming to co-develop these alternative narratives of the future. So let's start from futures visioning. We need to get better at imagining alternative futures and pathways towards them as a whole, as these can help to trigger imagination beyond the prevailing social system, as I mentioned before, but also they can challenge the way how things are done at the moment and maybe even enable us to understand the potential consequences of our actions in the now. As mentioned before, building these futures requires taking a bold stance of what kind of values and norms and governance structures will drive in the future. And what is, for instance, the role of technology and how equally are people treated and maybe even other species treated in that alternative future. And because people have quite different values and worldviews, creating these futures would work best if they are co-created by a variety of people and potentially even consider other species than only people. Which leads us to the next step, which is collaboration and engagement. We need to build stronger narrative of these desirable futures to mobilize large groups to work in the same direction. Since addressing sustainability transitions, of course, cannot happen in a vacuum within one organization, but require wide cooperation between the private and the public sector, research institutions, and the wider public. And in this context, it is actually very important to also remember that we need to include people on board in this change, as the challenge we are talking about is inherently a cultural one. Also, taking people on board when discussing alternative futures might help to motivate the need to change in the now. And then to the last point, connected to the last point of collaboration, we need to think in systems and strive towards a holistic understanding of the society at large, and not only focus on specific technologies or business goals of specific target industries, as these required changes need to happen in larger ecosystems. And to enable this, we need to consider the connected perspectives of sustainability, which is quite obvious. But then also we need to think about, is it possible for us to actually build a more even resilient and just future rather than just mitigating the damage that has been already done? But most importantly, to finish up, we need to acknowledge that we live in a world of complexity, uncertainty, and wonder. And thus we cannot just purely decide and control how the future will be like. We don't have the knowledge or the power as humans to do that, but we can aim to affect the direction of our actions with future-oriented thinking. And that's why we need to embrace complexity and most importantly, act proactively. So that was my part, and now I'm turning my eyes towards Kirsikka, who is presenting next.
Before we go to Kirsikka, thank you very much, Sonja, for the excellent presentation. I would like to remind our audience, please write your comments, questions, feedback in the chat, and we will come back to it in the last part. But before we move, let's hear again from you what you took away from Sonja's speech. So I will start another poll now. Let's see. I guess you should see now. And this time the question is, thinking from your perspective, which of these approaches below are the most critical to steer our actions towards a more sustainable and resilient future? And you can select multiple choice, but try to limit maybe 3 maximum. So we see some sort of prioritization, imagining alternative, better futures, challenging the status quo as a way of living, building stronger narratives of the future, better cross-silo collaboration among stakeholders, thinking in systems, or taking non-human stakeholders on board as well as human. Let's wait. Now I see that almost half voted. And definitely these are all important. So we were curious, well, how is the feedback? And there's a couple of leading ones. I will give a couple of more seconds to hear. Okay. Looks like maybe majority, 80% voted. So I will end the poll. Okay. And I'm sharing the results. So the winner is the better cross-silo collaboration among stakeholders. And a very close, actually, second is the challenging status quo as a way of living. And we absolutely agree. We think we need to start learning this collaboration among, for example, ecosystem partners, value chain partners, companies who are used to compete need to learn to work together to transition towards more sustainable futures. And this is one skill that we are trying to also communicate a lot in our among our clients. And challenging the status quo as a way of living, we do not need to take all these as this rules. So it's really interesting to see that you agreed that's one of the most important elements. I will now stop and then give the word to Kirsikka to continue.
Thank you, and nice to meet you also. My name is Kirsikka Vaajakallio, and I'm going to present the case study where we bind together the 3 actions that Sonja was just presenting in the form of a sustainable futures game. But before going into this actual game, I will briefly introduce the approach that we have utilized there. So one of the main aims we had was to make this quite abstract and ambiguous topic, the sustainable futures, engaging by utilizing design, games, and storytelling. And this approach actually stems from the time that I was working as a design researcher, and I was studying how design games can be used to organize co-design workshops with different kind of users and stakeholders. And one of the things that I was recognizing during that time was that besides actually being quite engaging and inspiring events for the participants, the design games actually help us to make things more manageable, and through that support joint discussion and also common sense making. For those in the audience who are not familiar with design games, so it's a design method that has roots in participatory design. It's not the design or games, but actually a special combination of both of them. The design part highlights empathy, designing based on user and customer understanding, and explorative mindset. And the game part refers to the qualities that are typically connected to games, play, and performance. And for example, one of the key quality there is this magic circle as an ideal and physical playground, where people are more easy or more freely can think about non-existing future alternatives and also have more out-of-box thinking. It also helps people to move in time so that they can more easily to think about past, current, and future experiences. In design games, to support people to enter into this kind of magic circle, we quite often utilize different kind of game elements, such as playing cards, game boards, or game rules. And at the same time, those also help to create this kind of a positive tension in the event. Then what do we mean about the storytelling here? So throughout the history, people have gathered together to share experiences and teach through storytelling. And it also has been a quite powerful tool, for example, in organizational transformations. But what do we mean it here is that we wanted to use storytelling as a way of promoting this kind of a what-if scenarios. So help people to think about that, what if things would be different? What could it mean? And how can we go there? And this has been more or less the approach that we have used when we designed the Sustainable Futures game that I'm going to present you next. It has been actually developed as part of an EU-funded project called Creatures. And you can actually learn a little bit more about that project if you go to the webpage. But that's a truly inspirational collaboration among academia and different creative practitioners, like you can see from this image that represent the consortium. And for us, it has also been a really great place to think about the sustainability from different angles. And as one of the results, so far, we have created this Sustainable Futures game. And how the game works. So first of all, it gathers together people with different kind of backgrounds and experiences together to envision this future state, and also to think about that, how to get there. As part of the game materials, we have these UN sustainability goals to give us some sort of boundaries and direction for the storytelling. It can be played as an online version, or we also have created a physical game board. And typically we have invited around 10 people to play with us, and then we have maybe divided them into a little bit smaller groups, facilitated by a facilitator. The game has two quite distinctive parts in it. And the first part is about co-visioning a desirable future state in 2030 in some specific location, let's say Helsinki, or we also been using Barcelona, for example, in one of the games. It doesn't matter so much what's the location. The more important thing is that it's somewhat familiar for the people who are playing the game, so that they can think about the current and how it may change within a 10 years time. We also use here some other kind of boundaries or topics to guide the storytelling, such as asking people to think about the living environment, infrastructures, what kind of new habits people may have, what kind of new social norms there maybe are, and what could be the governance models. And through this kind of topics, the people envision that what this kind of desirable future for them could mean. And it's not so important if the story is 100% plausible, but there should be some sort of a logic and the realism in it in any case. But the most important thing is that we gather different kind of perspectives, what the desirable future would look like for the different participants. And this part of the game is about this kind of food for thought for the next part. And this part is a lot about this kind of a creative mindset. So really thinking a little bit of out of box and envisioning that what could be, where I would like to be in 10 years time. Then the second part of the game, that's a bit different kind of mindset. So there you need to have this more analytical and solution-oriented thinking. And that's more about then that, okay, backcasting that, how we get there. So if this is the desirable future that we have been now kind of defined through this fictive story. So how to get there? And this part is more about the organization point of view. If the first was really highlighting the individual's dreams and perceptions about the desirable future. So this second part is a little bit more about that thinking from the organization's point of view that these people are representing. So where should we maybe shift the focus in the future, or what should we be doing differently, or how can we utilize our capabilities in the different ways to reach that desirable future. And what we have learned so far when we have been playing these games is that actually it really triggers the imagination among the participants to envision these alternative futures. It's also quite clearly facilitates this discussion around the desirability, that what it actually means, so that it's not just that what should be done or what could be done, but it's more about also that what is motivating for people to do. It's also really helping to form this holistic understanding of the interdependencies. So also I think this one really valuable thing there is to move between individuals, the personal perspective, and a larger society, and also then back to you and the organization that you are representing. Then it's really about connecting today's decisions to long-term consequences and helping people to understand and think about those. And then it's about guiding the actions of today towards desirable futures. And then at the same time, of course, when we are inviting people to play and have the discussion and thinking about this future, it really creates a sense of urgency to encourage behavioral change within these organizations and the people who are there.
Excellent. Let's go back to the previous slide. And now maybe it's time for the next poll. So again, we would like to ask hear your point of view. I'm launching the poll now. Which of these benefits that Kirsikka talked about, the value of the Sustainable Futures game, is most relevant and needed for your context? Is it triggering imagination to envision alternative futures, or facilitating discussion around this desirability topic, forming holistic understanding of interdependencies, connecting long-term consequences of today's decisions, or creating a sense of urgency? So let's wait to hear. There will be a recording of this video. There was one question, and I will address the other questions just after the speaking. Okay, I'm ending now the poll and sharing the results. So the winner was connecting long-term consequences of today's decisions. This is very interesting because we feel strongly this is one of the learnings of the last 10 years, actually, how many technology-driven businesses which became very successful from the business perspective actually had a very negative effect on how we live our life. When you think about social media and how we use all these certain digital tools that we can't live anymore without, and how it's affecting actually the way we are raising our children, the way we are, meeting our partners or spending our free time. So maybe desirability was not always embedded in those futures thinking when this technology enabling value was designed. And maybe towards the next 10 years, we as a community need to get smarter to make the decisions with a bit better thinking. But also I see here this forming holistic understanding of interdependencies is also the second, and this desirability. And this is again very important to be able to think the holistic society as a kind of whole, and not only think in silos of certain technologies, certain digital service, certain features, because that prevents us to make these connections to the long-term consequences. So thank you very much for this feedback, and we can continue to have a discussion around it. So I will now explain how actually you can experience the game, which was also one of the comments in the chat. Sorry. So on 20th of May, actually, we are organizing another game session as part of the Creatures project. So these open games will have limited places available, but we are getting feedback from the players, and then the Creatures researchers are observing the game sessions, and they collect data for the evaluation phase. So if you are interested in participating in this type of session, please send an email to me at zeynep.falay@hellon.com and show your interest, and I will let you know if there would be a possibility. And this is one of the fixed games. I think in the autumn, we will also continue to organize a couple of more open games for that purpose. Another option is we organize game sessions for different organizations in a form of this online future strategy and visioning workshop. So if you think your organization can benefit from this type of session, again, send an email to me, and then we can set up a meeting to discuss. And these are either half-a-day games sessions or a bit longer-term projects. And the last thing is, of course, we can also utilize this approach and build internal tools for different organizations. So this game is not only a static game, but actually the same logic can be applied to different industry, to different purpose, but the same logics we can play with the design and make it more suitable for your purpose and for your organization. So let us know, and there is no licensing model of the game at the moment. So Hellon has the copyright, and then it's part of the Creatures project as a research purpose, but we are developing it real time. So if you have any ideas, suggestions, we are very happy to hear also how to develop this further. So yes, now time for questions, and I'm going to read this some of these chats. Also, you can raise your hand, and then we can give you a stage to ask your question directly. So I will go back, and one of the first question was, maybe this is a good question for Sonja, from Terhi. She was talking that, yes, the idea of including non-human stakeholders is somewhat utopistic. Majority of the world's people have no say in how the future is shaping. They're only trying to survive and live with the consequences. So we should first focus on including these people in decision-making and dialogue rather than skipping them and focusing on non-human. What do you think?
I think that's a very good and important topic to raise. But I think that if we consider the seriousness of the situation, how radical actions we need to do in only a few decades' time, I think that all these things need to happen kind of parallel. As we know, for instance, from the Finnish perspective, we as Hellon live partly in Finland and partly in England. We know that the carbon footprints of these countries are so high that we need to change our actions quite radically here. And we need to do it now in order to actually even get any kind of a balance for the Earth systems. So I think that it's extremely important to include as many as we can in the discussions, but I think that these streams need to happen parallel. We cannot just sit and wait here. And also I think that it's important to remember that kind of let's call it Western world, although that's quite an old term, but the way we live our lives are also affecting how developing, like also called developing countries, which is a very old term as well, but now we understand what I talk about, are also like influenced by the ways of living in here. So that's why I think that also our lifestyles and our way of producing and consuming things need to change in order to actually change the grand narrative of the world.
Thank you,
very
Sonja.
difficult, very good question.
Yeah, thank you, Sonja. The next question will come to Kirsikka from Christian. I love board games. The best ones are when you can jump in directly and start playing it. What would you say is the threshold for stakeholders to play this game? Would they need to be fully immersed in the research in order to play the game?
Thank you for the question. I think this has been something that we've been actually discussing quite a lot while designing and playing the game. And also it refers to that how long the game playing can be, because what we recognize that the most interesting the game is, the more it takes in a sense. But due to the practicalities, most often the people, and we also want to include the quite top management business leaders here, so they don't have hours and hours to use for this, so that's why we have limited that it's the minimum is this 3 hours time. And we think that during that time, when there is a good facilitation and the game itself presents snippets from the research in a sense, that what are the starting points and the guiding boundaries here. So that's kind of enough. So they don't need to be so fully immersed in the research on this area, for example. But at the same time, saying that, we've also been playing this now with the more sustainability experts from the organization, so who actually have a lot of information and knowledge on the sustainability, but who need a little bit more about this creative angle and this in-between space to think about, and also to tie it with the personal and the organizational and the societal perspectives together somehow. I don't know if that was answering the question, but this is a bit of a ongoing discussion.
Yes, definitely. It's an emerging field and topic, so we don't have this super sharp answers. This is how it is, but we are also developing real time, and it's very interesting to hear your comments on these questions as well. So one question came from Anna. How is the results from playing the game presented, summarized to the players? Kirsikka, do you want to take this as well?
Yes, so at the moment, throughout the game, when there are this kind of a short summary moments where the facilitator is summarizing and helping that where the story is going and reminding that, okay, this is what you have created so far. And especially the important moment is in between these two different parts of the game. So after this more creative storytelling, we summarize a bit that, okay, what's the story that was created, and then going into this more analytical and backcasting mode. And then this has been actually developed based on our previous game, the Nordic Mobility game. And there what we did was always to collect these stories and these scenarios and write those down and then give those back to the players.
Yes, thank you. I hope that also answered Salome's question. Now for Sonja, there's an interesting question from Nata. Do you believe in power of individual to change the future, or only the community's systems holistic approaches would work?
I guess I have the same answer as previously. I think that the change needs to happen at all levels. And I think that it's quite interesting if we follow the public discussion at the moment, which is usually saying that we shouldn't only blame the individuals to make the change. But I think that it's important to acknowledge that individuals' decision-making, public decision-making, and private sector decision-making are interconnected. They're not separate from each other. They all influence each other. So in that sense, I think that both individuals can, of course, as collective or as masses, can influence how things are or how things are developing. But of course, also we need to make bolder collective movements in order to actually make this kind of critical decisions and critical narratives happen.
Can I also say,
Sure.
Say something here, because I think this is really interesting, and I totally agree what Sonja was saying. I don't know if it's just my personal or more about the Hellon's perspective, but we quite often start from the individuals because we always think that it's in the end, it's the individual people who we are dealing with. Whether we talk about the communities or we talk about the policymakers, in the end, there are individuals there as well. So it's also a little bit how you see this, who we are targeting in that sense. But like Sonja said, that that's why it's important that it happens in different levels and scales.
Thank you. So if I continue, there's a lot of interesting questions coming, so very pleasant to read these. So for Gökçe's, I can answer immediately that no, we haven't collaborated with the UN yet. We would love to. So if you have any suggestions, any connections, any recommendations, we would love to hear. And for Nata's question about testing the game, non-North American, non-EU countries, this is again very relevant. We didn't have the chance yet to do anything outside these regions. Of course, we are located in Europe and this was a EU-funded project, so our starting point was EU, but we fully understand the need to actually bring diversity into these discussions. Anna has another very interesting question that I'm going to read, and then you can decide who will take it. So you mentioned in the presentation that one of the goals of sustainable design is to mobilize people for transition. How does the game help to activate people in behavioral change? What kind of a concrete action plan does it create? How do people know what to do next after playing the game? Does the game function in continuous development?
Thank you, Anna. I may start at least. So like in this kind of co-design workshop and design games in general, so I think it's a lot about the individual's personal transformation in a sense that they learn something, they get interested in, they want to change a bit their behavior after this experience. What do we do in the game is, of course, in this backcasting especially, that part is thinking about that, okay, how do we get there? How can I change? How in my work role, for example, what could I do differently? What I should, like in our organization, what I should like be driving for next, what kind of thinking or actions. And there is the, in that sense, there are a bit of some sort of a roadmap thinking there and some kind of an action points coming. But of course, it's then about the people that how do they start doing it. And unfortunately, yet we haven't have possibility to have a longer term process that would somehow start with the game, for example, and then we would be supporting the next steps as well. That would be like the ideal for us and super interesting. But now still the games that we have been playing are more like these kind of triggers to act and think a bit differently.
Okay, so we promised to stop 5 minutes before, so I will start to come to the closing comments. So thank you very much, first of all, Sonja and Kirsikka, for excellent presentation. And thank you very much for the audience for great questions and interest. We really appreciate it. And before we say goodbye, I would like to announce here actually the next Dare to Share event, which will take place on 26th of May. And the topic will be the future of financial services. And our lead service designer, Andreas, and managing director, Timo, from Hellon London office will share their learnings and opportunities that they collected from multiple financial sector clients in Europe and North America. And I'm actually going to share now the link to register to this next event with you. And feel free to immediately sign up and add it to your calendars. Also, our Erika will share another link now for a survey. So we would love to get, it's a very short survey to collect some feedback to improve this experience. And please let us know what can we do better. And We would really appreciate any feedback. And as I said, we are, this is like the aim is to start a dialogue, to get some new connections and share our thinking with a wider audience. So I'm reading again. Do you want to say something, last words, Kirsikka or Sonja?
Just I could of course say that it's really thank you that you came and you were actively participating through these really good questions. Those also are food for thought for us to develop these things further, because we are not ready with these kind of things, but we need to be thinking that, okay, what next and how we can be better and how we can have a bigger contribution and use our capabilities in even more in this area. So thank you so much. And I really hope that we can collaborate in different ways. And I see a lot of familiar names there as well. So it's a bit of a sad not to see your faces, but I'm sending the greetings here. So thank you.
And I will also continue, thank you from my side as well. And maybe my final note would be that I think this is such a ambiguous, very kind of negative and very complex topic. And it's so easy to just us to either neglect it or just become way too critical. And I think that it's very important for us to at least try our best and to really discuss these things and to try to support each other in the change and not only focus on the negative. So that would be maybe my final take. Let's just try our best and support each other. So I think that's the way forward with the challenging sustainability topic.
So collaboration is the key again.
Yes, please follow the Hellon social media channels. We will be posting the link of this video in a couple of days, and then you can share in your networks. And also let us know if there would be any organizations willing to actually explore this game approach further with us. Thank you very much.